It's time to get sexy on Secular Sexuality.
Good evening and welcome to Secular Sexuality. I am Bianca, here always with my co-host, Christy.
Howdy.
And today we are welcoming Adam Knapp to the show, Adam the Atheist. Adam the Atheist was raised fundamentalist and homeschooled with strong focus on young earth creationism and right-wing conservative Christian values. Now that he's an adult, he wants to shine a light on dogma, ignorance, and extremism. In service of this mission, about 6 months ago, he started his own YouTube channel and has since become a valuable voice in the online skeptical community. Adam, welcome so much.
Thank you too so much for having me. This is awesome. Yeah,
tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, so basically exactly what V just said.
That's because I lifted it right out of his YouTube About section.
Exactly. She basically just stole that. I would use that as my intro, but she stole that from my page. But yes, that's exactly what I'm doing. I was raised in a very conservative, small town, East Texas. And it definitely left me with a lot of interesting things to talk about. And my channel, I like to sort of dive into different topics and sort of try to approach them in as good faith as possible, while also, like right now, I'm focusing on right-wing evangelical talk pieces such as Dave Daubenmire, Rick Wiles. I particularly like those because those are the most relevant to how I was raised.
Mm-hmm. Those televangelist types that just like get on stage and start screaming.
Mm-hmm. Plus, the research is a blast. I'm sure you get to pour through just hours of scintillating content.
Yes.
I'm so sorry for you. It's a valuable thing you're doing and the sacrifice you're making.
Thank you for the work.
I kind of enjoy it. I'm like, this is so terrible. It's amazing. But not amazing. It's bad. It's bad. But I enjoy it.
That is awesome. And you recently moved out here to Austin to join us at the ACA. And you and your wife?
Yes. Sorry, I just lost.
Oh, did you lose?
Lost some sound. All right, live air.
Okay.
No worries. We'll
we are
sort it out.
going to continue talking.
Yes.
We can still hear you, so
Awesome.
you are still good.
I'm still good.
Hopefully we will be able to fix that for you in the back.
Yeah.
So if you guys are listening live, first of all, apologies about that. Secondly, if you want to call in and talk to us about Christian extremism or miseducation or homeschooling culture or gender identity or any of these things that we're going to be touching on today, feel free to call us at 512-686-0279. We will be taking calls throughout the hour and hope to be able to talk to you. And if you are wanting to talk to us but maybe don't want to be on the air or can't, there are a couple ways that you can get in touch with us. You can either email us at sex@atheist-community.org, or you can leave a voicemail on our voicemail box, and that number is 512-666-0ASK. That's 512-666-0275. Awesome.
All right. Yeah, that's all the ways for folks to get in touch with us. And I really want to thank everyone for some of the great emails that we've been getting. I want to kind of put a word in everybody's ear to try and keep those emails with a question and, a little bit concise so that we can get right to the meat of what you're calling about or what you're writing about. But I want to just really thank everybody that has reached out to us that way. And, a lot of them we're able to read on air. Others we definitely respond to just as we can. So if we haven't responded yet, know that you're on our radar and you're super appreciated. And to everybody else who's, kind of wondering about it, we don't bite. We'd love to hear from you. And if we need to keep that anonymous or whatever else, we're happy to do it.
We don't bite unless asked.
Yeah.
All right. So let's talk a little bit about homeschooling, something both of us have a lot of real-world experience with. For you, I know homeschooling can look a bunch of different ways. There are people who homeschool for various reasons and in various ways. So what did it look like for you growing up in a homeschooled household?
It was very boring. And honestly, it was very lonely. A lot of homeschooling parents are really great at socializing their children. Mine, however, were not. So it was very much so... indoctrination focused as far as the schooling went, and then really you were kind of expected to just clean the house afterwards.
Oh, yes.
But it was very much so religiously motivated and very lonely.
Yeah, that strikes many chords. My world was basically my house, except for like chores. My mom had like a side business that I would help out with sometimes, and that was always super exciting. So it meant getting out of the house for like 2 hours.
Yeah.
But yeah, lots of chores, lots of divvying up who does the bathrooms this week.
Yes.
Who unloads the dishwasher.
I don't want to pile on the stereotype, but yeah, I went to a small private Christian school, so I'm going to go ahead and put that like maybe one rung higher on the ladder in terms of palpability. Anyway, we invited a local homeschool group to like all of our dances and things because they didn't have an opportunity for that one year. And then after dancing with them a couple of times, we didn't do that anymore. We no longer invited them because we found it didn't really add the party nature that we were looking for at those events.
Okay, so I was going to be suspicious about that just one rung higher than that. But if you were looking at homeschoolers to provide the party nature, then yes, you.
Yeah,
that was accurate. Yeah. Oh my goodness. Yeah. No, I'm sorry. It is a stereotype, but that would have been me. I would have been awkwardly standing in a corner, like hissing at people.
Yeah, same.
All right. So why did your parents decide to homeschool you? What was the impetus for that decision?
Right. So actually, it was more so my mother who decided to homeschool us. My father was a very passive personality. I don't think he would have personally cared either way. But my mother was, from everything that I can gather and the conversations that we'd had in the past, she kind of believed that public schools are too liberal or secular. I mean,
in East Texas.
To her, we tout secular, the word secular, as something to be proud of. For me, growing up, secular meant Satan, sin. It wasn't a term that you wanted associated with yourself.
Yeah.
So it was very religiously motivated. All of my curriculums were very religious. They constantly mentioned the Bible. And it was also, I really think that ultimately my mother believed that the best chance of success for me would be if I was raised in an environment where every element encouraged a certain belief in God and such. So I wasn't motivated. I mean, I guess she maybe could argue that she didn't feel that the public school system educated very well, which there are certainly discussions to be had on that.
Sure.
Last time I checked, I think the United States was 27th in education, which is not good at all. So then that's one of the reasons that people homeschool. But for mine, it was definitely more so religiously motivated.
Okay. Interesting.
Yeah, it's worth highlighting that there are a lot of good reasons for folks to homeschool, but there seems to be like a very specific culture that exists around a very particular type of homeschooler, and that's kind of more what we're talking about, but it's also a very big culture that I feel like maybe a lot of folks don't know about, and it can be really damaging to folks.
Yeah. And growing up, I always wished that I could be in a public school. I never really wanted to be homeschooled, but it wasn't an option for me not to be. So,
Yeah, same. I still let it drop with bitterness that I never got to go to prom.
Every once in a while.
Just a little bit. No prom for me. It was sad. But yeah, that's very similar to the reasons my parents also decided. It was passed off as we don't think that public schools educate very well, and we want to be able to give that education. And in certain subjects, that was true. Like I had an amazing history and English curriculum, very intensive. I couldn't pass anything until I got an A, and just because my mom was the teacher did not mean I would get an A.
Right.
So do this again. Okay.
God, I felt like my teachers were so arbitrary and biased anyway. The fact that whether or not I did a good job of cleaning the cat box or something like that could affect my evaluation, that would have been a just constant stream of arguments in my household.
Oh my goodness. Yeah, it was interesting. But yeah, there were definitely those elements of they'll teach you evolution.
Yeah.
And they'll teach you about sex education and all of these very scary subjects that, we don't need to talk about in a Christian household.
And it really does come down for many people to those two. And I mean, when we talk about history and science and all these other things, there's certainly an influence and a really powerful and dangerous one. But yeah, for a lot of folks, I feel like evolution is a huge tipping point. And I feel like getting evolution taught in school curriculums was what kind of set off this modern homeschool movement.
Yeah, I bet you could trace that right back to that for sure. I remember getting the most sex education I got in middle school, high school was reading the Epic of Gilgamesh. And I was like, oh my God, what the fuck? But yeah, that basically covered it.
My sex education was my mother cleaning whenever I'm like 16, and for some reason she's like, do you know what sex is? She was really hot about it for some reason. You know what sex is, right? And I was like, yes. At that point, I had access to the internet. Yes.
I get it now. Oh my gosh. Yeah. No, that was, oh my goodness. And then this is kind of deviating a little bit, but I'm curious what your daily schedule looked like. Was there a set, like, at 9 o'clock you do this, at 10 o'clock you do this, like, or was it more of a do everything you can as fast as possible so you have the rest of the day off?
Right, yeah, it was more so the second. There were times where we would start our day with devotionals. So in those days, we'd get up at 7 and, read the Bible, go through Psalms and Proverbs, like one a day or something. I think there's like 30 Proverbs or 31 Proverbs.
31 Proverbs.
Right.
The last one being the one about a perfect wife. So I went to a school where you read one proverb every day, and only when you were lucky enough to have a 31-day month, would you get to read about the reward of your previous 30 days worth of effort.
My God.
So we were like already setting up at a very young age this concept that like a perfect woman was first of all, the only thing that you should ever want to achieve in this life, and that also they're an achievement. Having a pretty wife is a gift from God to thank you for all of your hard work.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Cool.
I'm the youngest of 7, so by the time that I reached, especially more of like the high school years, my mother was tired. And so I was given a lot of personal freedom over my schoolwork. I pretty much set my own routine. I would finish it as quickly as possible so that I could go do whatever I wanted to do for the rest of the day. So yeah, I was very much so in control of what I did.
Interesting. Okay. I'm the oldest of 6, so I had the opposite experience of that.
Well, it kind of highlights for me one of the scary, exciting parts of the concept of homeschooling, because that sort of Montessori-leaning thought process of let the kids figure out what they're interested in, let it be self-motivated. That can be a really powerful tool when harnessed correctly by maybe somebody who had a license from the state or a degree in education or, or somebody who's just appropriately qualified. I'm not mean to speak ill of your mother, but I'm wondering what her capacity or ability to actually teach was. Right.
And yeah, that's a big thing that I care about a lot. I think that if you're going to homeschool, I think that whoever will be doing that needs to have a background in education. Obviously there are some people who are really savvy who can self-teach themselves that thing, and that's fantastic, but whenever you don't have any oversight over children's education, you can get a lot of different personalities who may not effectively see their ability to perform that.
I kind of think my mom took a more management style to my education. There was not a lot of actual, to my knowledge, as I got older, there wasn't as much, I'm going to teach you this subject, so I'm going to manage how you teach yourself this subject, which honestly paid dividends in a way, because I can do that really well now.
Yeah, with the right kid, it really can, and with the right teacher. Yeah. But I guess that's one of the things that scares me is there's so much political pushback against any efforts to put any level of oversight over homeschooling, or, because it's considered child abuse to not have your children in school as well it should be. And it doesn't take a whole lot to just throw that off and be, we're homeschooled. It's fine.
Yeah.
We talked about the Bible for 20 minutes this morning. We're good.
We're good. We learned about how the world was created, so we're all good. Okay, so talking kind of about preparing or failing to prepare you for different things. How did homeschooling prepare or fail to prepare you for things like dating and courting and sex and love and all of that? We kind of touched on the sex aspect a little bit,
Right.
but just the whole concept of finding a person or persons to be with.
I genuinely think it failed me in every way. I think especially when you are growing up in a religious homeschooling environment, it can fail you the most if you are LGBTQ. While obviously it's a lot easier for religious people to talk about straight interactions, especially cis straight interactions.
Yep.
There are not a lot of religious parents who are that far. All right, I'm not trying to generalize too much here, but I'm speaking about a very specific type of parent.
Right.
It can be extremely difficult for them to talk about cis straight interactions. So whenever you start getting into LGBTQ interactions, it is not talked about at all. Most of my personal education in like my sex education came from me asking certain questions online, right? So finding different resources that were either, like these government-run websites or different foundations that are really passionate about this. They'll have like those FAQs. They'll try to give some information. But where it hurts you the most is you can't learn what you don't know to ask.
Sure.
Yeah.
So there were a lot of things, especially when it came to STI and STD, infection rates and just what's the risk. Those things I didn't actually learn until I was already pushing 20, because I didn't know to ask those questions as a teenager. As a teenager, I never really thought about, I knew, like if you're having sex with a guy, make him wear a condom.
Yeah.
Like if he has a penis, make him wear a condom. Like I knew that.
Yeah.
But that's because that fell in line with cis straight, the way that it was portrayed.
Right.
Sure.
Right? So as soon as you get outside of cis straight relationships, it's much harder to get the information. So I think in that respect, it completely failed me.
Yeah, I feel that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I've told this before. There was literally one time in my entire life up until I was in grad school that I heard the word bisexual. And it was my mom saying, I can understand if you're straight. I guess I can understand if you're gay, but bi people are just greedy. Like, at that point, I didn't know what that was.
I mean, where's the lie, though?
I like more people than other people.
It's a feature, not a bug.
Right. But yeah, it took me until grad school to realize, like, oh, that's why I like looking at ladies' butts. Cool. Yeah. Awesome. Good to know. And then kind of along those same lines, because one side of what you talk about is kind of the gender identity and all of that, but you also talk a lot about skeptical thinking and about atheism. And I'm kind of curious how those two intersect, the homeschool culture and learning things for yourself and doing research and your ability or inability to access information and the value you find in skeptical thinking and reason and logic and all of this.
Yeah, so all of those were self-taught. So I am still self-teaching because that journey is never really over. So as far as my education went and teaching me to be skeptical or teaching me the foundations of that, it was the complete antithesis to that. I'm being taught that I'm being taught about a religious worldview, about God, and these things are spoken as absolute truth. So it didn't prepare me or teach me any of those.
Well, and just the number of voices. I mean, the diversity of sources of information. I mean, even in a really mediocre public school with really dated textbooks that were hired by a board with ridiculous, purchased by a school board with ridiculous beliefs and all of that, at least there are other people in the classroom who might have parents who taught them how to roll their eyes.
Yeah.
Fair.
Yeah. So those were, like, one thing I will credit my homeschooling experience with. It did teach me how to teach myself. And now, obviously, if you're using skewed information to teach yourself, you can end up with the wrong opinion or conclusion.
Right.
But whenever you are doing it as responsibly as possible, you can actually teach yourself a great many things. And so that is how, because I had that skill set from my homeschool experience, I was able to, and I still am able to, more effectively teach myself things, encounter new ideas, read. I'm able to really dive into that a bit more. I'm not saying that people who went to public school aren't capable of that. I just think that in my experience, it actually really helped me learn how to begin the process of educating myself.
Right. I think there's a very big distinction, and both of these are problems within homeschooling, but there's the lack of education aspect that you can run into if the parents just aren't willing to do that work. But there's also miseducation. So like I feel like we were both educated. We just were educated about the wrong shit. Yeah. And so we were given the wrong tools to use, and we were using them really well. But then you were like, oh, wait, fuck, I have to start all over again. Oh, my goodness.
The Earth isn't 6,000 years old. God damn it.
What? Yes. Wait, how long did China exist for? This is rocking my world. Do you have any kind of quintessentially funny or horrible homeschooling Christian stories that you can share?
You know, to be honest, nothing particularly stands out because my experience was so extremely my own, and I was in control over everything. I want to say all of it, but that's a terrible non-answer.
Just conceptually.
But like that's a thing I've noticed where like things that seem completely normal, like, oh yeah, of course we watch You've Got Mail all the time, and only Sleepless in Seattle once or twice because what's her face was in it? Yeah, Rosie O'Donnell was a character, and that was bad. Like that to anybody else sounds absolutely like just completely out there, but it doesn't. I wouldn't consider that funny. That's just like
it's just bizarre in a way, and it is. But it is funny that V and I can have a conversation about You've Got Mail and Sleepless in Seattle, and I genuinely wonder how people on the outside would see that conversation and be like, "What? What are they even talking about?
Why are they referencing these very dated movies?
Why are
that
they
all
talking
have
about
the same
V
plot?"
chips?
Yeah, right. Oh my gosh. Oh my goodness. Okay, so we do have a couple calls.
Yeah. Sweet.
Let's jump in and start with Rod in Arizona. Hello, Rod, you're on the air.
Hello again, V. Hello again, Christy. It's been a while. I think I called in and spoke to you guys about a year ago in relation to another topic. How you guys been?
Been good. I don't think you've talked to me before if you called a year ago. I've only been on the air a couple of months. And,
Maybe not been a year ago, but...
Well, technically, any time past 2 days ago was.
Boo! No, don't tell that joke. All right, moving on. What can we do for you, Rod?
Yeah, so I wanted to share an experience I had just yesterday. Fortunately, sadly enough to say, so I live in a very conservative veteran community here in Arizona, and basically I had a discussion with someone who's been going through HRT for roughly about 10 years. They are a combat veteran. They served in the Gulf War, and one of the things I discovered is throughout all their times, it's unfortunate that a lot of these individuals that experience this form of dysphoria and go through this, it's such a rough time that these veterans have because they can't get the entire treatment that they need in relation to their dysphoria. And when I spoke to them for that 4-hour period, they shared some of the horror stories, how they became homeless, they lost their job, they became chemical dependent on certain things, and it just culminated to worse things. And I just couldn't eventually afford it, even they're providing the service to treat themselves in regards to their condition. So I would, it was a pretty sad thing for me. But I also saw you guys were talking about education, and I grew up a Jehovah's Witness, so it's actually a very interesting topic you guys were bringing up on that. But I'd just love to get your guys' feedback on, what options do you think that maybe veterans who are trans could possibly use to possibly pursue further treatment or support in relation to themselves and so on and so forth, since the VA only covers it so much,
All right.
Yeah, and the sad reality is whether we're talking about something specific to gender dysphoria or something specific to trans folks or any form of mental health. I mean, honestly, even regular medicine, even when it might be directly connected to service, the fact is veterans are having to go outside of the VA more and more and more. And I mean, this was a talking point in I want to say like the 2000 election, and it has continued to be, even as we've plugged more and more people into these different wars and these different types of wars that are requiring a lot of different post-service treatment.
Yeah.
We as a country, I just want to say blanketly, are really falling down and letting folks down. Having worked in a psychiatric hospital for a number of years, the number of folks that we had there who were veterans was terribly upsetting, and a lot of them were homeless. You know, I don't have those numbers in front of me, but it's pretty terrifying numbers.
Yeah. I don't.
Yeah, like.
Go ahead.
I'm sorry, V.
No, go ahead, Rad.
No, please.
I was just going to say, I don't know any, I unfortunately don't have any specific places or resources off the top of my head.
Well, honestly, the Trans Lifeline is a great place to start.
Yeah.
That is going to be a great resource, and they will have at least enough information to put you in touch with the person who might have the information that can put you in touch with the person who might be able to help. I recognize it is a bullshit system and it's long and frustrating, but the Trans Lifeline is a great place to start. Honestly, your local crisis center, you can get there even just by calling 1-800-SUICIDE and going from there. That'll be a place to get started, but depending on where you are, there really aren't a lot of great national organizations. We're really fortunate here in Austin to have groups like the Kind Clinic and a number of others that do really important work, but it is spotty.
Yeah. Yeah, it really is.
It is incredibly spotty. I mean, like, when I spoke to them, they told me that they had gone through an organization in California that offered them some services, but even at that scope, it was very limited because their funding only came from certain avenues. And I mean, the horror story that you have to take what people tell you with a grain of salt, of course. But I don't see why they would be dishonest about it. But the amount of stuff that they informed me on that they were experiencing going through their ordeal, not only going through PTSD from being deployed in Iraq, and for the last 20, 30 years going through their experiences and being more older than I am, it just shocked me in my core. I mean, being a veteran myself, going through this myself, to me, it's shocking how much we've fallen against the veterans and other people in the LGBT community relating to the treatment and possible help that they need. You know what I mean? It's very sad for me, and I just wanted to get an opportunity just to bring that out if I could. So.
That's amazing. Thank you so much for calling and raising this. We don't talk about it enough, and we should, definitely. Another thing that might be helpful, depending on the resources available, both individually and in the regional level, would be the Secular Therapy Project. If you are somebody who is struggling, regardless of what that is, and you need kind of a non-religious, understanding ear to kind of let that all out and maybe get those resources recommended to you.
I'm writing this down. So.
Yeah. The Secular Therapy Project through the Recovering from Religion Foundation is...
Got that number already.
Yeah. Yeah, that would be another place that I would consider.
I don't mean to be an a-hole, but you mentioned, Chrissy, that the Trans Lifeline, was that the correct one?
Yeah, I don't have that number in front of me, and I wish that I did. It's readily Googleable.
Correctly in my notes.
Yeah, and I'll make sure to have a link to that in the footnotes for this episode. I've got that written down.
That would be amazing. I would appreciate that, Chrissy. Thank you for that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you so much for calling
awesome,
in.
guys. Well, you guys have a great show. Thank you for the opportunity to voice this, and I hope you guys have a great evening, okay?
Thank you, you as well. Yeah, I remember a couple of years ago I was in a Lyft, and my Lyft driver was, I think, from Japan, if I'm remembering correctly, and he was just absolutely shocked. He's like, you Americans take such terrible care of your veterans. And we had a really intense conversation about that, and it was shocking to hear somebody from another country be like, guys, you're fucking up.
Yeah, because it's so normalized for us.
Yes.
I mean, we don't even, even just having a conversation, I'll be like, yeah, man, we treat our veterans like shit. But then I'll actually see how in other countries, how they take care of their veterans. And I'm like, oh, wow, we really do treat them. Like, I'm not just saying that.
And that is a
true.
big part of the mentality is like, but what are you going to do about
Right.
it? And then you look across the pond and you're like, oh, that's what we should be doing
Yes.
about it.
Right? We have this idea that there's no other possible way to do it. And
That's American exceptionalism at its core.
Well, also, you kind of have to chalk it up to, at least for me personally, growing up with the generation I have, there is a lot of apathy when it comes to, oh, we treat this like shit and it never changes. And, you get a little bit apathetic about it, but...
there's just so much to be upset about.
Right.
You feel like,
Right.
can't do anything about any of it.
Right.
You can.
But we can, so...
Okay, we're going to go to Christine in Canada. Christine, hi. How are you doing tonight?
I'm great. How are you guys?
Doing good. What can we help you with tonight?
Well, I don't know if you can help me with it so much, and I don't want to go off topic, so stop me if I do. I just wanted to share how atheism has helped me in regards to sexuality.
Yeah.
Okay, I think that in my own case, being an atheist has allowed me, I don't know if it's because I'm an atheist, but I think it makes you more scientific and less susceptible to say things like religious guilt and all the commandments against, adultery and sleeping before you're married and things against homosexuality. It's allowed me this freedom and this great joy and this great ability to say, yeah, this is what I am, and I'm okay with it. And I've yet to meet an atheist, I'm sure they're out there, that has ever had a problem with someone else's sexuality. And I think that's a wonderful quality.
Well, there are definitely atheists who have many negative things to say about that. But yes, at the very least, it's not based on religious ideology that discourages thinking about it further and having conversations under the threat of eternal hellfire. So,
Yeah, which I think is like a really fundamental point. I mean, we're talking about how atheism helped your sexuality, and I don't want to get into like a ticky-tack semantic battle here, but I think it's really more the case that religion hurts your sexuality in so many ways. And if we imagine atheism as sort of like the default setting without adding in all of these like ridiculous ideas that aren't validated by science or verified by research or any of these sorts of things, you just sort of naturally come to conclusions that don't include homophobia, that don't include a lot of these other mores and issues.
that's an interesting way to put that. Yeah, for sure. I'm loving this because this is the intersection of what we're talking about here, secular sexuality. So you're right on topic, Christine.
Oh, good.
So
I just saw Matt. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
I'm curious. Were you brought up Christian? Did you find your way out of that, or have you always been an atheist?
No, I was lucky enough. I was born an atheist, like most people are born atheists. My parents were both religious. However, they decided for both me and my brother that when we were old enough or of age, that if we chose to believe in a God, then we could then choose to pick the religion that best represented that God for us.
Okay.
So I was an atheist. I did in my teens research different religions with friends and a couple family members, but was skeptical the whole time and remained an atheist throughout my life.
That's great to hear.
I have friends that, yeah, I think that's the way to go for most people. I think that it's a decision that adults should make, whether they agree with me or not on being an atheist. I mean, if you grow up and want to be a Muslim someone who follows Islam or Christianity or become a Jew or a Hindu, that's your choice. Just make it an informed choice.
Right. I think that's kind of ties into what we were talking about, the whole indoctrination through isolated childhood.
Right.
That to me is the problematic part. If you are an adult, you're informed, you've done your research, and you decide you want to follow a specific religion, as long as you're not hurting anybody else, like, okay, fine, you do you. It's a free country. It's the indoctrination of children where I have a problem. So I agree 100%.
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh,
and
I'm glad.
I think I forget who on this show says this the most, but ideas don't live in a vacuum. So I completely support adults making decisions about their beliefs or living out their beliefs. But I do think that we need to regardless of how confident the individual, the adult is, if they have children, most often, unfortunately, it does sort of bring in this indoctrination setting, especially if they especially if they buy into the more right-wing fundamental religion. Then making sure your children believe what you believe becomes paramount.
Yeah.
Because religion can often make some good people do some very bad things.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And it does sort of poison a lot of things, I find, anyway. I mean, of course, I would rather everyone be an atheist, but that's not reasonable and that's not attainable at this point. So if you're going to choose, make it an informed one, make it as an adult, and hopefully you'll come to the dark side and be an heathen like me one day.
Spoken like a heathen.
That's awesome. Thank you so much for sharing your story with us, Christine.
Great. Have a great New Year, guys. Bye.
Bye.
Take care.
Yeah, I don't know if this is on topic. It's exactly on topic. Yes. It's both the topics at once. I love this.
Yes.
Okay, we are going to get into interview block 2, but we do have someone who I'm excited to talk to on the line. So let us go to Drew in Texas. Hello, Drew in Texas.
Hey, people. Good to listen to some of my favorite people hosting an awesome show today. I was super excited when I saw this announced on Twitter. So
Yay! Sweet. Thank you for calling in.
Yeah.
Have you got a question for us tonight?
Yeah. So just a tiny bit of background. I was taught that using birth control was wrong. Mm-hmm. And I thought if I use birth control, something bad's going to happen. And, there's going to be consequences to this. God maybe might punish me. I got a little bit, it's kind of funny that I say I got a little bit risky and decided to use a condom. and nothing happened. And including, there was no pregnancy. That was great. That was an interesting, but God didn't seem to care either. And so for me, that really kind of broke a little bit of the illusion that was instilled in me as a kid. And I realized, kind of thinking about, especially Adam and V, you have both had different experiences than I have, and probably had some questions, around sexuality coming to your heads much younger than I did, because I've always been a cis straight guy, and everything that I thought was sexy, God also thinks is sexy, so it's fine.
Yeah.
And so I was wondering if any of you had any kind of moments that made you think about theology differently, or broke an illusion because, I don't know, maybe you decided, I'm going to present this way today and see how I feel. And, did you ever have any of those kinds of moments?
That's a good question. Adam?
For me, so one of the biggest, I guess, barriers broken for me was whenever I first came out to my parents. And I had a sibling who encouraged me to go to the Bible to see if I could find that it was supported. If he said that if I was going to live my life and I wanted to be a Christian, then everything I do should be supported in the Bible. Okay. So I started actually doing research, reading the Bible. What does it say? And this was whenever I encountered the liberal side of Christianity, because I really did not even know that there was another side to Christianity that was far more progressive. People who don't interpret it literally, or they actually pay much more attention to the original. Instead of just relying on the translations to convey everything completely, they would actually contemplate the original language that was written in far more. And so whenever I encountered liberal Christianity, it actually made me disbelieve the Bible even more. Because whenever you're raised being told that this Bible is inerrant and it is the inspired word of God and everything in it is 100% accurate and true all the time, then whenever you realize that isn't true, it can create a significant issue. For some people, they decide to retreat back to what was comfortable. For me, I was like, okay, it can't be inerrant if there are multiple interpretations. So I think that was probably one of the biggest things that happened for me regarding my identity of who I was and what theology I thought was what I felt about the Bible and God.
Mm-hmm. That's interesting. I've had a similar experience. My beliefs started shifting dramatically as soon as I got involved and like had friends who were progressive Christians and interpreted the Bible in different ways. And I started doing it, and then I was like, wait, I'm so far from what I used to be. Am I still even a Christian? But in terms of the one thing I can think about in Drew, what you were talking about in terms of the connection between the two, I remember being very uncomfortable one Sunday because we were singing worship songs, and they were all very masculine focused. Like all of the words for God was king and father and Lord and son and like all of these very masculine words. And I was very it made me uncomfortable. And I realized that I did not ascribe God a gender at all anymore. And this was after a lot of deconstruction on my part. But I remember bringing up to someone I considered to be a mentor and a friend, still a friend, but no longer a mentor, that I had a problem about this. And she was like, but God is male. I was like, but no, that's not how that works. And she was like, but it says that in the Bible. And I was like, well, men wrote the Bible. Of course, God would be a man if men wrote the Bible. And it was just this disconnect moment between understanding God and understanding how I saw gender playing out in big ways. If men are the ones writing these books, if men are the ones who are influencing the way we think about huge concepts like God that are, consistent across centuries. I don't know. It was a penny drop moment for me, and I think that understanding God as non-binary, for lack of a better term, kind of subconsciously helped open the door into, oh, that's a thing. Because it's very easy to ascribe an ethereal thing like non-genderedness to a concept like God. Less easy, at least for me, to ascribe it to a human being who, at that point in time, I'd only met people who identified with some gender. So it was an interesting moment of just, oh, that's a thing. I'm ascribing it to God. And then the God thing went away, but then I got to ascribe it to myself, which was interesting. I've never even thought about it like that. Wow. Blowing my own mind here. Thank you, Drew.
That's a really beautiful story, actually. I'm really glad that I asked that. I mean, I admire all of you guys, and I thought you might have something cool to say about that. So that's great. Thanks for your answers.
Oh, thank you so much for calling in, Drew. It was nice hearing from you.
Yeah.
Yeah. Have a great rest of your show.
Thanks. I almost said you too. It's like, oh, you're not having a show. That's us. Okay, so we do have some amazing calls still on the line. We will be getting to those soon, but I do want to make sure that we continue to kind of pick your brain a little bit.
Yeah.
So now I would like to move a little bit because the calls kind of moved into the whole sexuality, gender identity thing. So I'd love to talk a little bit more about that.
Yeah.
So on October 6th of this last year, you released a video titled "My Most Important Video Yet." And you came out as trans to the whole internet, basically, which is terrifying and very brave. And I'm wondering what kind of prompted you to make that video and come out in that public kind of way.
So there were two motivators, okay? So the first motivator was, in the past, I had received a lot of comfort from people speaking openly and candidly about things that they were going through in that sort of format that I chose. It was just, for me, I think about, the people that I don't know that might watch my videos, like the people who are the lurkers, who are in situations where they are kind of alone, or they have to be careful about what they say online or how they portray themselves to the world. And whenever I was in those circumstances, the people who actually shared what they were going through were a big comfort to me. So that was one of the big motivators. And the other one, I knew that my family, for the most part, was not going to be okay with this. And so I decided that by making that video, that was me taking ownership and full control over this coming out experience. And it is kind of interesting that Drew called, because Drew was like one of the people that I sent that script to make sure that it came across the way that I was hoping that it would. And it really paid off for me, honestly. I had a wonderful reaction from the skeptic community, the atheist community at large. There are some, I mean, as V said, we have atheists of all stars and stripes, but the love and support that I received from the atheist community and skeptic community at large was fantastic. And it really made up for the negativity that came with that as well. I mean, the love was overpowering compared to the negativity that came. But yeah, those were my two motivators, and I'm really happy that I did it like that. I was so concerned that I would, in hindsight, be like, oh, well, maybe I should have gone a different way, and been all so full of self-doubt about it. But it really went exactly the way I wanted it to. And by making a video, you can really take control of the narrative, because if you think about having to go to each person that's in your life and have this conversation, and then they start talking to each other, and then things get kind of mixed up or lost in translation to each other, and it's just easier to make it like one statement, cover all the bases that you want to cover, and say, this is it.
You said you posted this video to your personal Facebook page as kind of that coming out to the people who knew you in your personal life. Was that scary? Like, how was that received?
Oh, yeah. The 2 weeks before I made the video, I was just wrecked with anxiety. Like, my depression, it was the worst. I was so emotionally, not good. But the benefit was that I spent so long planning this and meticulously, trying to make sure everything was perfect, that when the day came, I no longer felt any anxiety or anything. I was like, I'm ready. This is my thing. I'm going to do it. So when I posted it, I could not have had more of a willpower in that moment. And of course, my wife was so supportive and there for me. And she just made everything so much easier. But I received a lot of, actually a lot of positive feedback, which was fantastic. But that was from people that I was friends with, former friends. The response from family was noticeably quiet. Because and that was to be expected, which that's one of the reasons why I again filmed the video and posted it on my personal Facebook, because I always try to be I don't want to be in everyone's face all the time with the fedora wearing atheist, yeah guys, you're stupid. So I actually had kept that stuff to a minimum on my old Facebook page. So that was me saying, okay, I've tried really hard to be as catering as possible to people's comfort zones. I'm not doing that any longer, because if I'm going to be openly trans for the first time, I'm also going to be openly everything else. And so that's why whenever I made that video, it wasn't just me coming out as trans. It was also me letting everyone know, I also have a YouTube channel. I'm also going to be doing this. I'm moving to Austin. I want to be involved with this all the time. So it was sort of just a PSA to everybody.
Yeah, it is nice to be able to kind of get it out of the way in a sense. And so I can definitely appreciate why you'd want to go about that, and why that silence is actually a little bit better than 15 separate arguments.
Yeah.
But I guess I just want to also kind of take a moment, since we're here with a platform, and say that I still hate that we live in a society where you are expected to come out.
Yeah.
Because you don't check off the default boxes, and because you're different from the norm, all of a sudden it falls on you and that obligation of having that conversation over and over.
Right.
So, I only want to give you praise and excitement for what you're putting out there. But I also want to just kind of turn the camera back on the world a little bit and be like, why does this need to be a thing? Why is this the expectation?
Right. Anything that is, because even if people are in straight relationships, but let's say they're polyamorous, anything that is outside of monogamous, cis, straight, you're expected to do a coming out. And it's just, I look forward to a society where it's not really like that anymore.
Especially when you check multiple boxes, but you find out at different times. And you're like, I have to come out again. I'm so sorry. Oh my goodness. Did you find that looking back on it, did your coming out experience, not only to other people, but also to yourself and like that realization, do you feel like that was impacted by homeschool Christian culture at all? Like if you had been in another situation, do you think maybe you would have known sooner or felt more comfortable with it? Or how do you think that input?
Yeah, absolutely. Because for the longest time, I mean, let's see. So I realized that I liked girls, and then it was, that was like the hot topic at the time, right? Like gay rights was like still the big thing. Like gay people going to get married yet? So the trans stuff, this topic now, like this, which is fantastic because they were kind of in the shadows for a really long time. Once that came up, that was whenever I started to realize, oh wow, like people really do this. Like I knew that there were trans people, that trans people existed, but it was, I never understood hormone therapy. I didn't understand the actual like science that we have available to us to be able to help our dysphoria and be the person that we want to be. So yeah, I would have figured it out a lot sooner, and I would have had a lot less trouble accepting it. I've been trans my whole life, but I didn't start consciously letting myself accept because I was worried about the trouble, essentially. Right. It's a lot of trouble to be trans in America. I didn't consciously start letting myself have those discussions until a year ago, a year and a half ago. It was very, very recent that I finally was like, okay, I'm trans.
This is a thing, I suppose.
This is a thing.
Yeah. It's funny. I feel like people who, I could see the sign, looking back, I could see the signs of like, I don't think cis people do that. Yeah. Like, think about this with this much intensity. Or, like, consume the kind of material from the creators that I loved. Like, this feels like maybe I'm trying to tell myself something a little bit. Yeah. Yeah, but I always wonder what it would have been like to be a non-binary teen. Like, I think that's something that I'm really excited for this next generation to experience, because I think that would be really cool to know who you were that early on. Yeah, that is awesome. I love seeing, because, on Twitter you see all types of different people in certain posts, and you'll see things that go viral, and it's really cool. It's really cool to see teenagers being able to openly wear labels and accept identities that some of us are only just now finally okay with, like, being open and honest about. It's fantastic. I love it. It's really exciting.
Yeah.
It just makes me laugh to see so many older folks like push back and like, they're just going through a phase and they're, shifting through all these things. And, I have to say that's what your teenage years are. Yeah. Like whether you identify as punk or emo or a pirate or a ninja or whatever, like putting on those stupid labels and getting really passionate about it and then a week later changing it is kind of part of that identity development. And so even as we see more teenagers play around with and try on these roles, even if it doesn't necessarily stick. And I do want to be very sensitive to the fact that research shows pretty overwhelmingly that young children recognize their own gender identities and that trans kids should be believed and taken very seriously. But even still, as 14, 15, 16-year-old has an opportunity to know words like non-binary or pansexual or these things that just weren't on the table for us.
Yeah, right, exactly. The labels don't make people who aren't those labels that thing. It's that you give the language to the people who are to understand themselves. And I guess my last question for this set of questions is just, I know for me, I'm constantly kind of seeing problematic assumptions and ideas about gender roles and like my role in the world keep popping up, even though I'm constantly deconstructing it, it feels like things just keep happening. I'm like, oh, like that's an interesting thought. I know where that comes from and I know that it's wrong, but it's still there. I'm curious, are there any are there any ideas about gender roles or anything you're working to deconstruct, or how are you finding
those holdovers?
Yeah, kind of making sure that you're deprogramming all of those different pieces.
100%. Absolutely. Growing up now, like when I look back on my childhood, I realized that, a lot of the things that we would label as toxic masculinity, those got to me whenever I was younger. I didn't listen to what they told the girls. I listened to what they told the boys because I wanted to be a boy. So don't cry. Don't let anyone see you cry. Don't be a wimp. Don't be weak. Those were all the messages that I tried to exemplify. So I have a lot of holdovers from that, and it's definitely something that I'm very aware of, and I work hard because, like you said, you can deconstruct something, and then it's almost like you notice something new. Like as soon as you finish the old one, and you're like, okay, like I'm done with that. Like you realize there's this next thing that you want to work on. So it's very interesting, and sort of one thing I've noticed too is that there will be things like I'll do something and that'll make me feel dysphoric, right? And then I'll be like, well, why do I feel dysphoric about that? Whenever I sit there and really think about it, I only feel dysphoric about it because I'm adhering to very strict gender roles, right? So whenever I start to, I'm like, okay, but let's think about how gender actually is, and let's think about the ways that we express ourselves. It's not dichotomous, right? And so then it actually helps alleviate some of my dysphoria because I don't have to look this specific way or sound this specific way to be like male, right? So it is a big benefit. Whenever you realize that some of your dysphoria is only because you're, unconsciously enforcing gender stereotypes onto yourself, it can relieve some of it. Obviously, not all of it's going to go, but it can help. It can be a big relief.
That's a very interesting take. That makes a lot of sense, actually.
Yeah, I mean, just dysphoria as a concept is going to be significantly reduced when you don't have rigid gender rules.
Right.
So, yeah, that makes total sense. And the activity that you're doing, I mean, actively deconstructing these things is specific to you and your experience, but I mean, it's a skill set that we all need to be really working on growing. I mean, just like a week ago, my girlfriend and I have like something of a division of labor, and it's not necessarily down gender lines. It's more just that I don't mind cleaning toilets and I hate folding laundry, and so that's just sort of how it worked out. But, she was gone and there was laundry that needed to be done. I'm grown-ass man, I can do laundry. And I'm doing our laundry, which is all in like one massive pile, and I realized that like just sort of putting her clothes in a pile for her to fold herself and doing only mine is, of course, a very shitty thing to do. But I was like, I don't understand where any of her things go. I don't even, frankly, know how to hang up or fold some of these garments that make no, like, architectural sense to me. And the geometry is off. So it put me in this place of really wanting to just be like, well, I can't do this, and just, walk away from it. And it was, honestly, I had to really swallow my pride. And I don't say that in a proud way. I'm not bragging about how humble I am so much as to say, like, here I am in 2020 being the kind of dickhead who's like, I just couldn't figure it out. Like, your dress is in a pile on the floor. Is that where you wanted it? Like, and so, yeah, humbling myself and like asking her, where does this go, was honestly really embarrassing. Like, I am still like kind of awkward about it because I just picture, my dad would have never done that in a million years. And even though I don't aspire to be like him, you carry these things with you, whether you realize it or not, and they pop up at the weirdest of moments.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. The funniest thing for me is I remember being on the bus one day, and these two old women were talking about their husbands, and they were both like, yeah, when I was in the hospital for some reason, and he called me to ask how to make a can of tomato soup. And they were just like, oh man. And I was like, that's horrible.
It really is.
Like, it's such a manly quality to not be able to feed yourself. Like, that doesn't seem right.
No.
That doesn't seem okay. But yeah, I take your point completely that looking at gender roles under a microscope and really realizing that it's not an either-or situation a lot of the time can really help.
Yeah.
That's a really good point. We are going to take the last 2 callers. Let's start with Susanna in San Francisco. Hi, Susanna. How are you tonight?
Hi.
Hi.
Hello.
This is really exciting.
How can we help you tonight?
Well, first off, I want to say thank you to the entire ACA. The work you do is so important, and it speaks a lot to me. And also, I want to give a quick shout out to some amazing YouTubers I saw in the live chat tonight. So Andy Fellows, Shannon Q, and Drew at Genetically Modified Skeptic. Keep speaking out and doing what you do, because I'm a fan.
Yay.
Anyways, I wanted to start with that gratitude. So I wanted to talk to you guys about, how you work through feeling ashamed of, sexual things you rationally know are totally okay.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, so I was raised as a Catholic. I call myself a recovering ex-Catholic. The whole culture of silence juxtaposed with this idea of confession and confessional, I find makes it really difficult for me to navigate conversations around consent. I guess I wanted to talk through that with someone.
Yeah, for sure.
Walk me through that a little bit. How do you put the dots together?
So I always got what made me think about it earlier was you guys were kind of talking about informational control in the homeschool environment.
Sure.
And I wasn't homeschooled, but I was almost entirely, all my education was from Catholic schools. And my parents took on a lot of that informational control themselves, just around other topics. And so if I was ever caught looking at sexual information or pornography or something gay or reading something gay, or I would always get punished for it. And I'd always have to be brought out and had a serious sit-down conversation with my parents and basically confess to them.
Mm-hmm.
And it makes me never want to talk about what I like. Because I feel like I'm going to be thought of as bad and dirty again. And
when there's only one type of sex, you don't really need to talk about the sex that you're having. You know, when it is all this very submissive to the husband, procreative, missionary style sex, and pleasure's not coming into it. It's strictly heteronormative. I mean, even still, there are conversations we should be having, but in that context, we're not really teaching kids, or kids in that situation aren't learning how to talk about sex at all. And so the concept of consent, you're right, isn't going to come into that, let alone pleasure.
Right, especially for, people who were born in female bodies. It's not something that you're even taught as a thing. I can't speak for what my brothers were taught, but for me, because that was separate too, that concept of the boys talk to the boys about sex and the women talk to the girls about that. It wasn't a collaborative thing at all. But the idea that I could have pleasure or should prioritize it in any way was completely it wasn't even on the table. It was extremely different to have a partner or to have somebody who is like, hey, what do you like? Tell me what you like. I was like, I don't know. What do I like? You're going to have to tell me. It feels really weird. But I completely empathize with that.
Yeah. I'd repeat V, but I repeat V. Ditto.
I appreciate it. Wow, that was really interesting for Christy to say what you said, because I only can really get off to some pretty disciplinary BDSM stuff, and it's I think it's because, like, my control over the situation is completely taken away, so I feel like I'm not sinning.
Yeah.
That makes a lot of sense.
Because I didn't have a choice.
I think that's a pretty common experience. And, there's value in knowing that about yourself, like in running that desire to ground and being able to say, like, oh, this was probably caused by that. But it's also not necessary. So I hope you don't feel bound to it. And pardon the pun. But in addition to that, there are opportunities to sort of like expand your diet. There's not necessarily a need to, but I think of it in terms of like somebody who only eats rice and beans every night. If you're healthy and happy, great. But if you begin to just sort of slightly dabble in some noodles or, you go from rice to rice-a-roni. And I mean, there is opportunity to sort of expand your repertoire if that's something that you're looking to pursue.
Right. You've heard it here first, folks. Secular sexuality suggests you dabble in some noodles.
Dabble in noodles.
Dabble in some noodles.
No, I think...
I love ramen.
Yeah.
I think that's a really important thing to know about yourself, and to have come to that conclusion shows that you do put a lot of thought behind this, which is amazing and more than a lot of people do. So kudos to you for that, for sure.
Let me follow that up very quickly just by saying you called this show... I'm sorry, I didn't mean to speak over you, but I just wanted to point out, like, you called this show and you're talking about your sexual preferences on live air over the internet. And
not to freak you out.
Not to, like, make that super terrifying all of a sudden, but the fact that you had the courage and the capacity to do that when I know so many folks don't. I don't know where you're at in your journey in terms of like deconstructing these things and healing from some of these traumas, but certainly you're able to do this, and that sounds like a real accomplishment from where you came, and it's terribly impressive.
Yes.
In other words, go Susanna!
Yay!
Oh, you guys are so sweet. Yeah, I really wanted to challenge myself to call in because I studied psychology and I want to continue to study psychology, and I know that experience will help refute my indoctrination. I need to have some positive reinforcement, and this was really good practice.
Man, you jumped to like the 50-yard line here. You were like, this wasn't just practice, this is it. Like, you're doing it. It's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to keep trying.
Yeah. Another thing, just real quick, and I don't know where you are in terms of relationships with people, but something that can really help is to have a partner who is willing to have these conversations and who is patient in understanding that this is where you're coming from. So definitely that's something that I would be on the lookout for as well, making sure that you're entering into these sexual experiences with people who you know will listen to you and ask you questions and be willing to have that back and forth, because that's not everybody either.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah. I'm single right now, so it's putting myself out there can be, a little nerve-wracking. But, again, I gotta try. Keep trying.
Well, definitely call back and let us know how it goes.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate you guys a lot, and I hope you had a Happy New Year.
Thank you. You too. See, I said you too this time, and it made sense. All right, we've got one more caller on the line. Eilish in North Carolina. Hello, Eilish. Am I pronouncing that correctly?
It's Eilish, but credit preferred.
Okay, perfect. What can we help you with tonight?
Eilish for Elizabeth. So I know at the beginning of the show, you all were talking about having been homeschooled.
Yep.
And unfortunately, I have experienced that. Between mid-first grade and mid-sixth grade, my mom chose to homeschool me. And she did a better job than some of the other people I saw. Some people in our church cult thing, definitely, they called it homeschooling. But I think it was just keeping their kids out of school, not doing anything. But long story short, I'm also a lesbian. And I have been in a relationship with a committed partner for almost 2 years, and we're best friends, and we grew up with each other.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah. But definitely my upbringing, even though I've been out of it for a really long time now, I'm 34, and I left the cult when I was 20.
Mm-hmm.
It definitely hindered knowing what I like and being able to talk about it, and also having people between the last time I dated the person I'm with and now not being healthy either, because it's also in our culture to not be sex positive, like even between fellow women. For some reason, it definitely hindered it. And mostly I just wanted to let people know out there, you're not alone.
Mm.
Yeah, absolutely.
I live in North Carolina now. We moved in together 5 months ago, and I see homeschooling stuff everywhere.
Really?
And it's not particularly triggering, but I am like a concerned citizen type of person. Every time I see those, I just like want to knock on the door when it's open and be like, I'm child services, no children for you.
Yeah.
Because it's the Bible Belt. So most of these people are probably religious, and most of them probably have somewhat of the same motivation that my parents had, which was to make sure that I was being taught their particular type of Christianity, because my partner and I grew up together. But by that, I mean that we met in 6th grade when my mom decided to stop homeschooling me, and the person I'm with happened to also go to that same school.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do you know if North Carolina, I'm not sure. I know only very few states have actual requirements for homeschooling regulation in terms of.
Yeah.
I would not wager in
Probably
favor
not.
of North Carolina.
Probably
I find
not.
it very interesting that they have some of the harshest policies, well, certainly in America, but really in much of the developed world, towards trans folks. And also, as a Texas show, we get a huge number of North Carolina calls. I mean, I feel like there's a connection there just because of the oppression, honestly, that's going on. So you're right. You are in good company. There are lots of other people who are going through what you're going through. And, you know, I don't know where you're at in healing from all this, but I'll just say again, there's lots of opportunities out there for you. There is a lot of healing that's available and plenty of strategies that do work. So I hope that you're, going into this relationship with all of the support and healing that you need.
It definitely helps it for both feminists.
Yeah.
That would help.
Yeah.
That's kind of a requirement for a healthy relationship in my mind.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's amazing. Though, congratulations on moving in.
You're right. North Carolina is special.
Yes.
I went to Pride in August, and there was a preacher, and they kept trying to remove him, and he just wouldn't go away. It's like that bug that just won't die. Go away.
Metaphor for religion as a whole, anybody? Oh, my goodness. Well,
thankfully, the state does finally have a Democrat as governor, but I don't know what that means. Because, yeah.
Oh, my gosh.
Thanks for taking my call.
Yes. No, thank you so much for calling.
I'm probably further along in healing than she is. She stopped going to church last year. I'm really proud of her.
Aww.
I won't say her name because I don't have her consent to do that. And she's not out as an atheist. The last way to find for the, I don't know if either of her brothers watch this show.
Right. That's a good
I feel like it's probably safe to assume that there's probably not very many Englishes in the United States. But
Well, it's you and Billy, so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm sure you get that a lot. I'm sorry for inflicting that upon you.
It's okay. I just wish that we pronounced it the same way so I could get a little help from that.
There you go. Oh my goodness. Yeah. Thank you so much for calling in and sharing your story. It is good to know that, we're not alone, and we've all had these similar experiences and can empathize with each other.
Yeah.
Yeah. My mom literally didn't do any sex ed at all. And literally what she did when I was in college and I started hanging out with I got engaged to a guy, because we all experiment at some point. Yeah. And she was listening into our phone calls somehow and
Goodness.
basically told me, like, in more wording, but like, don't do it. It's gross.
Oh.
I wish that I could ask my mom questions about that.
That makes me very sad. Yeah.
It does.
Mm-hmm.
Friends of mine from when I was younger, one of them had said something that's actually kind of sad. And as I grow older, I'm thinking about it and I'm like, that might actually be true. One of them said, your parents only had sex twice, once for you and once for your brother.
Yep. That's
probably true. And it's very sad.
Yeah. Well, it's sad if it's a result of oppression or a lack of feeling like you can enjoy it. I know there are people out there who just don't like sex, and that's also completely valid. But if it is a situation where your parents could have enjoyed themselves and found that there was a block there in terms of what they were taught or what they believed, that is kind of heartbreaking, and I'm sorry to hear that.
My mom is also deeply conservative. In my late 20s, I did directly ask my mom why she didn't give me the talk, especially because I found that many of the people who I considered friends at the time who had gotten some version of the talk, they got some sort of information and I didn't. And she told me, she's a nurse, told me right up, you should not be knowing about things that you should not be doing.
Oh.
And before that conversation or something, face off, she told me about a 17-year-old girl who had shown up in the ER. She worked in ambulatory surgery because 17-year-olds' bodies are not ready for pregnancy. And because of her telling me the legal available version of that story, because, you have to abide by HIPAA laws.
Right.
I
Please
literally
do.
looked her
Please.
right in the eyes and like, Mom, you tell me stories all the time. You know that doesn't work.
Right.
Come on.
Exactly. More knowledge, more education is never a bad thing.
Yes.
But yeah, thank you so much
She's
for
also
calling
against
in.
Yes. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Yep.
Best of luck out there in North Carolina.
Thanks so much.
It's not as bad as I thought it would be. Huntersville is very nice. But yeah. Yeah. It's not like
Have a nice night.
The sticks or something. Thank you. You too.
Absolutely. Bye.
Bye. Oh my goodness. We do get a lot of calls from North Carolina.
Yeah. I don't know what the YouTube algorithm is doing or how that tracks.
Well, I'm glad that we're out there reaching you guys.
Yeah.
We need to support each other. We actually did have one more call that I'd love to get to real quick since they are calling in from internationally. Romy in Germany. I'm butchering all of the names today.
That's okay.
Romy.
Romy, hello. Calling in from Germany, huh?
Yeah, hi.
Hello. What can we help you with?
Yeah, so I've been kind of questioning my gender lately. And I don't know. I've heard some people say that if you're questioning, then you probably are kind of genderqueer, at least.
Can be very likely.
Yeah.
Would
What's
you like
your
to-
experience
Yeah.
been in questioning? I mean, what does that look like for you? Can definitely be pretty challenging material. So,
Yeah.
we're definitely here for you. And, if we need to talk off air or over email or whatever else, we can do that too. But we're definitely concerned and I think excited about the fact that you were brave enough to give us a call.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Romy, would it be more helpful for you to maybe talk to us over email, or would you like us to stay on the line after the show ends and talk to us then?
It would be really cool if I could stay on.
Okay, yeah. What we'll do is we'll pop you back on hold, and then we'll come back to you after the show is off air so that there's a little less pressure. How about that?
Thanks.
Okay.
Yeah, thanks for being brave. We'll touch base in a bit.
Yeah.
Which is, I guess, just another moment to say that, we've talked to people who have had the courage to call, and not everybody, it's not just about courage. Like, not everybody is in the place in their life where they're ready for that moment or, have just the opportunity. I mean, the logistics alone in terms of calling from Germany on a show that, airs at 7 Central. So, to all of those folks, I do want to remind you again, just that we love getting your voicemails. We love getting your emails. Hit us up on that Ask line, that 666-0-ASK. We would love to hear from you and just have that, that opportunity to let you record as many calls as you need to. If you want to call up 5 different times until you can get it just right, if that's what it takes for you to feel comfortable, please do, because we would love to hear it and love to be able to share your story with others if we can. And if not, I mean, we would still just love to be a resource to the secular community or the questioning community.
For sure. Definitely. Thank you so much for calling in, Romy, and we will talk to you after the show. All right, so last bit of this interview for you. We actually got so many calls today. I was so
awesome.
excited. You must bring you on more often.
Yeah, they're all calling because of me.
So just kind of some last thoughts and next steps for moving forward, because we like to make sure that we end on a positive note.
Yeah.
So what's something that you took away from your Christian homeschooled experience that you still value and utilize? And this could be a lesson that was either intentionally taught or unintentionally taught.
I think it actually kind of goes back into something I mentioned before, which is the ability to educate myself, the passion and the motivation to consume all the information I can about something. It's really benefited me in learning evolution. Because whenever I was 19, there was a 7-year-old near me who knew more. I mean, it was that stunted.
Yeah.
And I'm still not nearly as scientifically literate as I am going to be one day. But
hopefully that's true of all of us, though, right?
Right. That is true.
But I'm very motivated. And so that's something I have to give credit to my experience with homeschooling, is that it did teach me that I do love to learn. And so that is probably the thing I'm most grateful for.
And then maybe kind of the flip side of that. What's something that you've found that you've maybe pinpointed for yourself or for that kind of culture as a whole that might be the most problematic or the most damaging? The thing that kind of you've had to, I don't want to say get over the most, but...
Oh, man, that one's a bit harder because... There's so many things. I mean, should we take an hour for me to answer that question?
Part 2 coming up.
I really can't pick anything out specifically. There were far too many bad habits, negative worldviews, just wrong opinions that came from it. To try and answer it quickly, my opinions on gender, sexuality, definitely were some of the worst. Whenever I was, before I came out, before I realized that I was, in fact, I liked girls and that I was trans, I was extremely homophobic and transphobic. Because, now, this is not to say this is always the case, because there are cis straight people who are homophobic and transphobic, and it's not because they're hiding something in their closet. But for me, that was the case. So I think that's the only thing that I think I can answer really that quickly.
Okay, interesting. Yeah, that's a tricky one, because that's definitely a thing where you're like, I dislike this thing. I have things about that aren't related to sex or gender. Like if somebody that I perceive looks like me, I dislike them because I think that I'm like, oh, that probably says bad things about me.
I do want to ask real quick, have you noticed that it is that you've been able to pick out other former homeschoolers in different environments.
Oh yes. It's another kind. It's like another radar situation.
Yeah, I don't even know how to explain it, but there's just a sense I can talk with someone and I can be like, you were homeschooled, and most of the time they were. It's the strangest thing.
I mean, all you have to do is drop like a 90s pop reference, and when they don't get it, they're
like
either foreign or they're homeschooled.
Yeah.
Although the few times that you get it wrong and they weren't, they get they're offended. Like, I'm sorry, I was. I'm not saying anything bad about you. Oh my goodness. Yeah, I think for me the most damaging thing was just a fear of people.
Yeah.
Like, I was taught to be afraid of people, not just like personally because I didn't have people to interact with, but also like they're out to get you. The one world government was going to come and tattoo 666 on your forehead.
You're in the world, but not of it. Like, fear everybody.
Yeah,
you're
everyone
at
was
war.
a threat.
Spiritual warfare is waging all around us. I mean, all of these kinds of ideas.
Yeah. That's a whole other topic.
Yeah.
I could go on forever about. But yeah, I think for me, it's just realizing that people are generally okay.
Yeah.
And then just some questions about moving forward and what we're going to do in the future, or what we can do. How can we find a way to reach kids in this kind of isolated and information-controlled culture with positive and comprehensive education about sex and gender? And I know that's something that in the show kind of we try to do, and we get callers that are discovering these things for the first time and have these questions. But just more broadly, anything that you wish you had, any resources?
And again, I'm not an expert. I'm speaking from my own experience, but I genuinely believe that we need legislation. I really do. I think that because, in some states, I think Texas, for example, you don't have to provide any oversight. All you have to do is say, oh, I'm homeschooling my kids, and that's where any overwatch stops. My mother never had to my knowledge, never had to share our curriculum, never had to show what we were doing. There are cases where people say they're homeschooling their children so that they can abuse them more easily.
Yeah.
And there is no way for us to reach them if we don't have some sort of oversight.
Yeah.
There are a couple states, and this could be, I can't name all the specifics, but I remember that growing up, all of the homeschool moms that I knew hated California and said California was the worst because California made you need to have a certification or something to educate. And they're like, how dare they? I don't even know if that's technically true, but that's what they believed. But that's good. We need more of that. And it is, I have a video about this on my channel. You can watch it there or do the research on your own. If you actually look at how lax the restrictions are and the regulations are, it's kind of scary because they can teach their children anything.
Or nothing at all.
Or nothing. They're literally, you can teach them nothing. And there are cases where that's actually happened. So I really think that we need to get some oversight on this.
That's a good point, for sure.
And because every time I talk about homeschooling, there's always a few people who come up and they're like, not every homeschooling. I know not every single homeschooling family. I know not every single homeschooling family is even religiously motivated. Whenever I'm speaking about homeschooling, especially in negative connotations, it comes with the understanding that I'm speaking about a very specific type.
Right.
So I know that I don't want anyone to feel vilified if they homeschool their children and they're doing it responsibly. Good for you. I understand.
Again, it's a valid choice. If you're an adult and you're doing the research and you're doing your best and you have all of that knowledge, then sure, go for it. Again, as long as you're not hurting anyone, we totally accept that.
Yeah.
It's just when you start using your power to indoctrinate and to isolate children, that's the problem.
Well, and if you're educating your children at home responsibly, I should hope that, maybe you're not excited about the notion of government interference, but you want your children's education to have some level of respect. You want them to be able to apply for colleges and not just get laughed out the door. And so some level of government oversight has to be only beneficial to the folks who, are doing this in responsible ways.
And to touch on that real quickly, it is a benefit to the homeschooling community that there is a stereotype that homeschoolers are smarter. The reason why is that it's one of the only things that prevents homeschoolers from being looked at negatively, because my diploma is literally a piece of paper with my overall credits written on it. Because there's this stereotype, which isn't always true, because stereotypes are never always true, that homeschoolers are smarter. It helps it have less negative connotations when you're looking for a job or you're wanting to apply for college, even though it's not always true. So,
and I didn't get the benefit of that stereotype.
Well, but the reason that I'm happy about it is for the children who haven't had the best educations.
Yeah,
you're not being excluded from decent colleges or decent jobs just because of that, because you shouldn't have to wear the baggage of that your entire life.
Right.
So I'm glad that exists for homeschoolers, just hopefully to give them some sort of benefit out of it. If they didn't receive a good education, hopefully they get something good out of it.
And then I think that kind of ties into this last thing that I wanted to ask you, which is, what's one thing you'd say to a young homeschooled Adam that maybe you had wanted to hear, or that you didn't know you wanted to hear, about hope and encouragement for what was coming after and what life was going to be like?
First of all, you're not crazy. You're not. Okay, the thing, to not believe any of the things you're like, not really believing anything that you're told like that, it doesn't make you crazy. It always gets better. And one day, just no matter how restrictive or lax your education was, one day you will be in control over that. Mm-hmm. And I really hope that, especially if there are any teenagers who listen to me who are potentially going through this right now, I really hope that they have the privileges that I had whenever I was that age, because the internet's a double-edged sword. But my God, it benefited me so much. I mean, it was, so basically, stay on the internet, but stay away from conspiracy sites. Don't listen to alternative medicine. Watch the ACA.
That's right.
Yeah.
No, I think that's...
And get in contact with me, because I want to get you some resources.
Perfect. Let's move into contacting. How do people contact you?
You can contact me on Twitter at Adam the Atheist. Okay, I watch my DMs very carefully. I'm not super famous. Nothing. I'm nothing.
You're not an influencer?
I'm not an influencer. You can direct message me. I don't I'm just a person. So feel free to direct message me. Get in contact with me. Let me share some resources with you if you need it. I also have a YouTube channel, also Adam the Atheist. My branding is very consistent, isn't it?
It's a good thing. And that's Adam spelled Atom.
Yes, Atom. I know I say it like Adam, but that's because I'm from East Texas and we don't say atom.
No, it says.
Except for Kent Hovind.
Okay, and then if you want to get in touch with us at Secular Sexuality, you can either email us at sex@atheist-community.org. You can call our voicemail box. We've pitched the number a couple times now. It's 666-OH-ASK. That's 666-0275. And then we're also on Twitter at Secular Sex. And we also respond to direct messages. So feel free to DM us as well. I think that's just about it. Adam, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thanks for having me.
I'm so excited to finally have you in the studio. I've been excited to meet you ever since you moved down to Austin. And this was great.
Yeah, this was fantastic.
So, and I also want to thank the crew in the back who came in on a Thursday night to do the work. Thank you, guys. Woo!
Because I have flesh, and I can rejoice right here, right now, without a satanic Bible.
Okay. Thank you.
Very proud of their new soundboard.
Yep, they are having fun with that.
All right. Well, I suppose with that, it's time to just thank all of you for joining us and for being here on a Thursday night or whenever you're listening to this. Again, get in touch. We'd love to hear from you. Facebook, Discord, all of these wonderful places. And until then, we guess you just should go out and give yourself a big ol' orgasm. Or better yet, give somebody else one.
What are we doing, man? What are we doing?
No, you're done.